really in a case that is ongoing in a news cycle that is chaotic, to say the least. 39 narratives in a few hours. That's hard to respond to. One of the questions mentioned the importance of the open source community within that very specific case. And it just so happens that we have the open source community here to talk about that. So I'd like to welcome to the stage one of the open source investigators from one of the best investigative journalism outlets out there, The Insider, who teamed up with our partners at Bellingcat in order to identify the GRU agents. So please help me welcome to the stage Roma Dobrokhotov.
Hello. I don't have slides, sorry, but I hope that you all will be entertained. Actually, the Insider made a lot of investigations on GRU. This is not the first one. We made an investigation when we first found that GRU, which is Russian military intelligence, stands behind Russian hackers who hacked Hillary Clinton, Emmanuel Macron, and many other targets in Europe. Then we make an investigation that also was joined with the Bellingcat on downing of MH17 Boeing in Ukraine. Again, we found high-ranking GRU officers who were involved. So it seems like if you take any interesting topic about Russia, if you scratch it a bit, you will find some GRU agents inside. So this is also was the case. And we started working on that together with my partner, Christy Groze from the Bellingcat in last September, when we saw presentation of British authorities who showed two pictures of people, so-called Bashirov and Petrov, who, as British authorities said, were involved or were guilty of poisoning Skripal. So what we had only their pictures, we had only their fake names, because British authorities said that there are some real names of these agents that possibly they know, but they won't tell. And this was the only one information that we have in the very beginning. So in 2 weeks, we already published the first part of our investigation, proving that these people really are secret agents. And in a month, we published all of that, showing that yes, we know their real names, and actually that there is a third guy, also a GRU agent who was involved in another poisoning in another country. So it was a very, very big story already. And interesting part of this, that while investigating this, we found one more time that Russian security agents are not the people like you would see on HBO series, not these super brave agents who work conspiratively and who are super efficient and so on. It's more like somebody from Johnny English or something like this, or Mr. Bean, because it was actually super funny, everything that we found about these people. But first, I would just shortly explain how we found these people. So, first of all, we asked all experts that we know where usually GRU agents get prepared, get their education. So we had some narrow circle of military schools where they usually go. So we thought that if these people have these fake names with or some fake biography, it must be a little bit look like their real biography. At least their age must be the same. So we've looked for the people with the same age who graduated from these military schools, looked for all the open sources data. So we spent like dozens of hours looking into all the social networks, into photos and videos, etc. We found only one person that looked a little bit like Bashirov. At that one time, his fake name is Bashirov. So we didn't know his real name. So we found one person on some photo from Chechnya who looked like this guy, who graduated from Dvaku, which is Siberian military school. And we even now we don't know if it is him on this picture or not, but it attracted our attention to this military school. And on the first page of this military school, there is a monument. I mean, on their website, the monument with some names written in golden letters. These are heroes of Russia, so-called, so people who get the most important medal for some brave things they did, who graduated from this military school. For some reason, most of these people had biography on the website, and two of the people didn't. One of them was a little bit too old for our object, and one was the same age. So what we did, we just looked into passport database, which is already not that really open source, because it's, of course, it's actually illegal to get access to this open source, but it is sold everywhere in internet. So I don't know whether we can call this open source if it is open only for $100. Well, actually, soon you will see that actually Russian government is the most transparent government in the world if you have $100. So corruption is the best partner of investigative journalism in Russia. So we found this information in a database, and there we found the picture of this person from whose name was written with golden letters, Anatoly Chipiga. Anatoly? I don't remember. Chipiga. So, and we found his picture there, and the picture was absolutely the picture of the same person, so we even didn't need a forensic expertise to prove that this is the same person. And then we started to look at his biography. So we found that he was born in a faraway village. He then went to military academy. No, first he went to this Dvaku military school, then he served in Chechnya. So he's more like a soldier than an agent. And then he went to Ukraine, where he made his old brave deals during Ukraine war, after which he became hero of Russia. So all of his career he was a soldier, and after that he, for several years, went to military academy where GRU agents are prepared, and suddenly became a secret agent. How effective these secret agents were, you see, because we can, together with Christy Groza, find them after like several days Googling something with our notebooks. Also, how effective they are, you can see by the fact that Skripal is alive. We have dozens of traces of poison in all over the Salisbury. Their pictures are in all videos of all CCTV cameras. And they killed actually a wrong person who was not guilty. So this is how effective Russian GRU agents are. The second person was a little bit more difficult to find, but we already had some experience while working on our other investigation on coup d'etat in Montenegro. Also, again, as you can guess, that was managed by GRU. There we found interesting thing that when GRU agents have their second personality, fake personality, they usually keep some things the same, like the name, the year of birth, or the city of birth, because they want to keep their fake personality close to reality. For example, to have the same accent, or to turn your head on your real name, etc. So what we did, we tried to filter database of Russian citizens with some different combination. Like we would keep the same name, the same year of birth, and the same city of birth, and look if there are some people that coincide. And after implementing several such filters, we found that yes, there is a person who looks the same because he has the same year of birth, the same region of birth, the same name and patronymic name. So yeah, a lot of things coincided. And we found a person, Alexander Evgenievich Mishkin, and started to look into his biography. We found that he was he started as military doctor in St. Petersburg. Then we found that there was a car registered on his name, and then we looked into a database of car registration and saw that he sold this car to a person who was registered on address Khrashovskaya Chaussee 76, which is headquarters of GRU. So at that moment, we understood that this is the person we need. And again, after looking into the database, we found his real passport with his real photo. But this is even not the most funny part, because then looking into this database, we understood that if you put GRU addresses, and there are like some military units that are attributed to GRU, several in Moscow, many in other regions. So if you put some address of this military base into car registration database, you will see hundreds or even more than 1,000 of real name of GRU agents with their mobile phones, real names, addresses, and all the information. So if you had around, even it is less than $100, I think it's like around 10, and if you have access to this car registration database, that means that you know almost all the names of all the GRU agents. Is it an open source? I don't know, but this is one of the most open databases in the world because it's like traffic police, like the most corrupted institution in the world. So then, interesting enough that we found that in their foreign passports, which is also super fun actually, they're issued one by series. So if you change the last number of passport, for foreign passport number of a GRU agent, you will find another GRU agent. So that's how we found many other GRU agents, and several series that are attributed to GRU. So we also looked into the place where they traveled and with whom they traveled, because you can also look at you can also see it in the database of border crossing. And what we found that both of them at some point traveled with a third guy, whose fake name was Sergei Fedotov. And we, or Sergei, possibly his real name, and Fedotov is fake, or vice versa, it doesn't matter. But there was a third guy, and we found that he was in Britain also in the same day when Skripal was poisoned. But he was in London, so we think that he was kind of organizer of this stuff. So we found where this Sergei Fedotov moved inside Europe. And we found that he also was with some other GRU agents in Bulgaria in a very interesting day. At the same day, one of Bulgarian businessmen whose business was weapon trading was also poisoned by neuroparalytic poison. So, you know, it would be very difficult for Russian foreign minister or Putin's spokesperson to explain how does it happen that Russian tourists always appear in some countries directly at the day when someone is poisoned with neuroparalytic poison. That is very, very interesting coincidence. Actually, we understood that if you look into this database of how GRU agents are travel in Europe, you can find more and more other interesting stories. Some of them we're continuing to working on. So stay tuned and read the Insider. Actually, to give some more wider perspective, because I know that there are a lot of conspiracy theories about Russian agents that possibly they behave like this to show that how they are brave and that they don't hide their traces and that it was all intentional. So just some other examples of how Russian secret services work. For example, coup in Montenegro also failed, also unsuccessful, GRU agents arrested, nothing happened. Why it was so unsuccessful? One of the reasons, you can see these documents all in court, this is all official and you can find it in open sources. One of the documents is a document of transferring money from one of the main GRU agents to some Serbian combatants. So how did he transfer this money? He did it through American company, Western Union. He put his real name into check, and he put address, because you transfer money through Western Union, you put address. The address was Khrashovskaya Chaussee 76, headquarters of GRU. So there is his signature there, his passport data, all the name. Now it is a part of this criminal investigation in Montenegro. This is Russian conspiracy. Also, there are a lot of talks that it is an efficient GRU, that it's not like all our secret services working like this. Another example that we posted like a week ago, there is another secret service, so-called SVR, which is more like from, Americans series. So people who work undercover in foreign countries. So, again, open sources. You look into open database of the buildings that were given to different organizations. So you look into organizations SVR, and you see the buildings that were given by Moscow mayor to SVR. Then you go to Russian so-called Rosregister, so database of like housing, and you absolutely officially, without any bribing anyone, you can see all the names of the people who got apartments in these buildings. So you got names more than of 1,000 Russian spies. And we checked they are really spies. We didn't publish their names and where they work in what countries and under what cover, but we even don't really need to publish it because anyone can do it with 2 clicks. So Russia is the most transparent government in the world. You all are welcome. Actually, I have tons of information to tell you, but I think that we have only several minutes on questions left, right? So maybe I better answer your questions than to talk myself.
I'll take moderator's privilege, which is to say, all of these sources are extremely open, right? So do we run a risk of standing on a stage that is shaped like a hashtag and telling the Russian government specifically, exactly where we find all of this information?
So you think that after telling this, they can close the access? Well, if they do, actually, that will be a very good thing if they do. But for some reason, they don't. There are many people ask, so would Russian authorities change something in their operations after we publish all this information? Will they be more effective? It's like asking, would Russian car producers do better cars when everybody understands how shitty they are? Maybe they would try, but they can't do this. There were funny stories when even Vladimir Putin went to some presentation of a new Russian car, and it just didn't turn on while he was sitting there. Even in this important moment, they can't make it working. So possibly they won't, but and I hope they will try and they will close all this secret information, because of course possibly some of these Russian spies do a good job fighting against terrorists. So maybe they should be protected. I hope they will, but. After making 5 years of investigation, I don't believe this.
Interesting. Questions from the audience?
Roman, great presentation. It's Luke Harding here from the Guardian.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a kind of big explanation? Because Soviet spies were quite effective. I've talked to KGB, GRU defectors who say we were very professional back then in the 1980s. We killed people more efficiently. What has gone wrong? How do you explain this Johnny Englishness aspect of modern Russian spying? What happened?
There can be 2 explanations. One of them is that actually it is possible that they always were like this, but we didn't know about that because the world was not that transparent that it is now. So investigators and all the people around, they didn't have all these instruments to look at what they are doing. Now, really, 2 guys with notebooks can disclose thousands of spies. Another explanation is that, actually, possibly the government became a little bit less efficient lately because of corruption, because of many other reasons. And if you look into the other stuff, like, for example, Russian spacecrafts that are falling down, or Russian military missiles that get into the wrong targets, or something like this. This is all the symptoms of the same problem, that the government is not efficient, officials are not motivated enough. Most of these people think about their personal interests. Most of FSB generals earn millions of dollars making business from their position. And we learned it recently, when maybe you've heard about Russian important investigative journalist Golunov, who was arrested, and we found out that actually he was writing about funeral business, and very high-ranking FSB generals and Ministry of MVD, they were controlling this business and profiting from this business. That's why they opened this criminal investigation. So that is maybe a possible explanation why they're so inefficient.
Next question. Is your job getting harder?
What?
Is your job getting harder, would you say? As tactics are adjusted to, as open source develops?
Well, it's a little bit getting harder in the sense that, yes, they try to close the sources that we use, and sometimes we need to find some new ways of looking information. For example, when we started the investigation, we found that actually all the GRU agents with their fake passports, this information is in passport database, but it is like, it's written that don't give this information. So if you find someone's passport files with letters don't give this information, that means that it is proven that he's a spy, right? So that was super easy at the beginning, but now they deleted all this information, which I think will be a big problem for these guys, because if they use these passports and they're stopped by anyone, like traffic police, they can't explain why the passport is not in database, and how can they exist at least. So yeah, but I wouldn't say that the main problem why it is more difficult for investigative journalism in Russia is not because of this, but because of censorship, because government is suppressing big media outlets. There used to be very big corporations like Forbes, Kommersant, RBK, some others. All of them now changed their owners, and they are censored now. So only our project like ours, like small internet projects registered abroad, etc., we can survive because it is very difficult to suppress us.
There's a question over here.
Thank you, and thank you for that really interesting information about your forensics. I have a question about Golunov and this journalist who was arrested, and then there was this huge outcry and cooperation amongst the Russian media, those who are not as controlled by the Kremlin. Do you think America is missing the fact that there are journalists working very hard, and there are people working toward freedom of speech? Do you think we just tend to see the Kremlin and not understand there's this rising generation of journalism and fact-checking in Russia?
I don't know, because I don't know what American authorities think about this, but I've heard from people who communicate with them that really they, both authorities and community, like journalist community and others, they really underestimate the existence and the scale of this journalistic job that made from inside the country. Because there are people from the regions, there are human rights watchers and activists on the ground, even in the most dangerous regions like Chechnya, for example. So everywhere there are some people who do the dangerous job. So, but I think that with help of the investigations like ours, people from other countries, they start to understand that, wow, there is not only Bellingcat, but there are some Russian people who cooperated with Bellingcat. And I think it's a good sign, because actually all these people inside Russia, they need this kind of cooperation with the BBC, CNN, big organizations, big corporations, because first of all, it makes their work more secure. And secondly, it gives a big leverage for the investigations, because it gives big coverage. One example, when we first found Russian hackers and GRU standing behind them, even concrete military unit of GRU, no one noticed our investigation. Only year after, when prosecutor Mueller published his indictment, only after that, everybody started to discuss this military unit, even without knowing that we were publishing it a year before. So at that time, we didn't have this cooperation. So now it's much better, I think.
Just a quick follow-up on that. What makes you most optimistic about the community of investigative journalists in Russia and in the kind of former Soviet space? Because I think that that's exactly right as a point. A lot of and your point, a lot of the information that was in the Mueller indictment specifically, or the Mueller investigations, and the statements that came out of the special investigation that drove news cycles for more than a year in the United States, a lot of that was known already, and it's because of your work. And so every
not
time
only mine, but all the Russian journalists and some foreign journalists also who are working in Russia, because suddenly Russia became popular in 2014 after the war, after all this Brexit, Trump stuff. So Putin had to do a lot of bad stuff to make Western community notice Russia and also Russian journalists. So the good side of this is that possibly they will also notice our investigations and work of human rights watchers and activists and so on.
Jessica asks a great question on the board. How much risk are you putting yourself in by doing these investigations?
Well, it's very difficult to evaluate the risk because, you know, there is a famous saying that if you hear a bullet, it's already not dangerous, right? So now we don't hear a flying bullet. Possibly it's because they are still charging their gun. Possibly because we are in the middle of tension, so they don't want to do it, at least right now, while we are quoted by big media outlets. That's why this cooperation with big international media is so important, because like a good investigative journalist is one that if he is killed, everybody understands why, because his investigation was important. In my case, maybe it will be a little bit more difficult because there are many investigations, so like you will have to choose. But still, I think that it a little bit makes us more secure. Also, another thing that makes us a little bit more secure is that Vladimir Putin, he shares some conspiracy theories that we are only arm of MI6 or CIA or Mossad, I don't know. So we are just leaking information that are given by secret services. So he underestimates himself our job. So if we are that unimportant, why would he like bother to close our website or to put us in prison or to kill us? So I'm absolutely comfortable with his conspiracy theories because it makes me more safe. So yeah.
We heard from Iyad al-Baghdadi this morning, who's currently basically in protection in Norway. And obviously, his level of concern is a little bit different. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your level of day-to-day kind of concern, freak out, as a follow-up to that question?
Well, I think that, it's again, difficult to evaluate, but I think that most people, people who are in most danger are actually people who live in Russian regions and who write about some ecological stuff or about things that seem to be not that important. But they are not in the middle of the light. That's why we see a lot of these journalists attacked, killed, in prison, and so on. But when you live in Moscow, when you report about things that attract international attention, I think that you are a little bit more safe because it will need some Kremlin's decision to kill you or imprison you. So they, at least for now, they do this kind of decision very seldom.
Audience questions? I haven't looked over here in a while, I'm sorry. How is the dissemination around the Skripal case different or the same from other Russian operations of the same vein? Are they getting more sophisticated? As you said, are they getting dumber? Are they getting less sophisticated? Is there a certain Johnny English stance that goes around it? How do you kind of...
Well, I think they are in line with all the other kind of operation. So let's look at what GRU did and how successful they did. They brought the Buk missile system into Ukraine, but they shot the wrong airplane. They tried to kill Skripal, they didn't kill, they killed the wrong person. They tried to make coup in Montenegro, they failed and were arrested. They created a big hacker group. Yes, they hacked Hillary Clinton emails, but still they became very visible and everybody knows who is responsible. And for example, they then hacked Emmanuel Macron's emails, but Macron still is elected president, and now they have very bad relations with France because of this. So they're super active, but they are not very effective. And I think that actually what the results of their work is that Russia is now under sanctions, and that everybody understands that Russia is responsible for many things. Though there was some doubts. Do you remember that Donald Trump said about hacking that, well, possibly it is some fat guy in Brooklyn and like sitting on his sofa with his computer. At that time, many people, even in Russia, shared the same opinion. But now we have like 100% proof that this is GRU because we have like millions of facts that are proven. So yeah, unfortunately today, the only one result of their job is that yeah, Russia is under deep sanctions, and that no one for many years it will be very difficult to rebuild trust with Western community.
As a wrap-up question, the entire room is a room of digital Sherlocks who are incorporating skills and strategies into their own work. Yesterday on the stage we had our president and CEO, Fred Kemp, who is what he would call a recovering journalist, on stage, and we asked him, what is the single piece of advice that you would give to a digital Sherlock in their own work?
Well, I think that, well, several advices. First, that is a super good time for cooperation, also cross-border cooperation. For example, also, together with Krista, we are now going to make a foundation that will support this kind of cross-border cooperation and give some grants for journalist investigation, and will give our instruments to the journalists who will participate. And there are many such kind of foundations, many such kind of organizations, OCCRP, ICIG, and many others, JGN. You should try to look into people who can be your partners in other countries, because it's make your work far easier, make your investigations quicker, and your life will be safer, because there will be many targets for these dangerous people. They will understand that it is impossible to kill investigation by killing one journalist. This is one advice. Second advice, well, just really learn how to use all these databases, both open sources and not that open sources, because you can find tons of information in things, not only in how, like in last presentation where you were taught how to use like Google search. I think actually most of the people already know this, but there are some other databases, like databases of crossing border, databases of cell phones, I mean like companies that provide cell phone communications, so where you can find who these people were calling and when, where they were situated. So we used to think that this is accessible only for police, but now I understand that at least in some countries this is accessible to everybody. So my advice, use it.
Please join me in thanking Roman.
Thank you.